I actually call it reacting, because reacting is when you don't process anything in your mind and you're just, bleh,
I like that. It's unconscious.
Yes. And responding is when you are conscious of what you're feeling and how you're going to navigate those emotions during that time that you're feeling it. And we're talking seconds here.
Yeah.
And then how to respond to it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Xpect Performance podcast. On the show today with me is businesswoman and entrepreneur Tanya Price. Tanya has a business called Transform People, and what they do at Transform People is they unlock human potential in the workplace. They have extensive experience with driving self-awareness, improving cohesiveness, and unlocking team potential. Tanya herself is the recipient of the KZN Businesswoman Association Social Entrepreneur Regional Award in 2017, and she was also a nominee for the Standard Bank KZN Businesswoman of the Year Award in 2019. In this episode with Tanya, we dig deep into what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to overcome your own self-doubt to move forward and progress in a constructive way to what it is that an individual has set out to achieve. And what really strikes me about this episode in particular is the way that Tanya frames responding versus reacting. And I think we can all resonate with times in our life when we have reacted, we've allowed emotion to get the better of us. And in doing so, we haven't responded in the best possible way that is beneficial for ourselves and for all parties concerned. So I love what she did and how she framed the difference between responding and reacting, because we always have control over how we respond to things, irrespective of what happens to us. And it was a great way that she chose to frame that and to put that message forward. As always, you know the deal. Like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. Tanya Price, welcome to the Xpect Performance podcast.
Thanks, Clint. Nice to be here.
My absolute pleasure to have you. So I'm going to start with the most important question that I'm going to ask you throughout the course of this interview. How are you today?
I'm great. I'm going through some major changes in my life. I'm relocating to Cape Town at the end of the year. I've been here for 12 years, so there's a lot of life logistics going on, but I'm excited and nervous at the same time, so I'm good.
Nice. That's very good to hear. So Tanya, you've got a very interesting business. It's a business around service, and the ethos is about making people better and improving people and improving groups of people and how they interact in groups and empowering the individual. Can you tell me a little bit about that business and how it's been going so far?
So the business has transformed, as any business does. It has to evolve. I don't think any business can stand still, because I think that's a reflection of ourselves, right?
Yes.
So it's a training business, and what the business has taught me is that in training, there's so many more factors that are as a result of training people. And if you can do it properly and you can do it effectively, making sure that the human is before the task, then you can really make a difference to people's lives outside of a work environment, outside of that workshop.
Yes.
And once I discovered that, which I could only have discovered on my road of training, then it came to my mind, what else can I do? Because I was serving people, but the greatest reward was that it was serving me, and it was healing me in so many different ways. And for me, that was the most outstanding thing about training people.
Yes. So one of my favorite quotes is, if you want to learn, teach.
Yes.
And it's so true. I do that. I teach people for a living on how to be fit and healthy and how to make changes to their lifestyle. And it's the same thing. Often I find myself giving people advice that you also need to adhere to and listen to yourself.
100%.
And I think that's one of the biggest secrets in life, if you want to be successful, and we're going to chat about what that means to you and to me a little bit later. But one of the simplest things that a person can do is to follow the advice that you would give other people.
Sure.
You know, not easy to do, but really, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. Can you tell me what type of training do you do? Can you give me some pillars of what the workshops look like?
So the workshops can be based on people's needs and objectives. I like those the most, I must be honest with you, because then you are helping somebody with their end result. Whether the end result is employee engagement, whether the end result is, teaching our leaders to lead effectively, and I don't mean strategically, I mean humanly effectively.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a really big difference. So if somebody says, listen, we're having an issue with entitlement in our workplace, or we're going through some major transformation changes in the sense that we now need to give people promotions, but people that have been in the company for 10 years expect that promotion because they've put in 10 years. But what have they put in?
Yes.
That's what you have to ask yourself.
Yeah.
And so those types of scenarios come up, and I love those training sessions. I also have to add that one of the things that I come across a lot in certain leaders or certain companies is where they say, but we spend so much money on training and then they leave us. I don't know if you've heard that. People are afraid to train their people just in case they leave.
Yes, it's a mindset of what's the opposite of abundance? Of scarcity.
Scarcity, yes.
It's a mindset of scarcity,
yes.
Because you're fearful of spending that money, and that person's going to leave you, so you're going to then have a scarcity of intellectual property, that person's going to go out and they're going to be in a competing space and then take away business from you, etc., etc. Whereas I found it as counterintuitive.
Well, totally. I mean, my question to them when they asked me that was, well, what happens if you don't train them and they stay?
Exactly.
I mean, what do you got?
That's a waste of money then.
Absolutely.
Because what value are they adding to the company?
There is no value.
Yeah.
So if you think about anything in business, every decision you make, more or less, there's a risk factor.
100%.
So the risk is train them and they leave, or don't train them and they stay.
Yes,
Yeah,
both are risky.
And both are hard. Which hard are you going to choose, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's one of the most important things about exercise too. Which type of suffering do you want? Yeah, so we're going to suffer. That's guaranteed. So that's rooted in Buddhist theorism.
Yes.
Suffering is guaranteed. So you get to choose what suffering to a certain degree. Sometimes things in life happen that are out of our control. But by and large, do I want the suffering of having to do the exercise and I suffer in the moment because it's difficult? Or do I want the suffering of what happens when I have poor self-esteem, when I'm out of shape, I'm no longer appealing to people, so it becomes harder for me to find a partner, I'm more likely to get depressed, etc., etc., etc. What type of suffering do I want?
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest misconceptions that people actually have about me training other people, is that they think that I really like to train, and I don't.
Oh, really?
No, I don't like to train. I mean, I would much rather be out there like going to surf and like, do things for fun.
Yes.
I don't find training fun.
Yes.
I find it necessary, but I don't find it fun.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big misconception with people in the gym, especially when they haven't been to the gym for a while. They go to Virgin Active and they assume that the people that are there, that are in shape, go there and always want to be there, when it's not the case. The difference between those people and the people that are out of shape, the people that are in shape are the ones that go to the gym even when they don't feel like it.
Absolutely.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
And I think that puts paid to exactly what you're saying.
I also think it's, you have to think about, when I think about exercise, I'm sure not everybody, I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people have been injured at some point in time. And when exercise has been taken away from you, you want to exercise. Don't we all? We all want something that we can't get, right?
Exactly.
And so we always have to think, I always say to myself as I get older now, I'm like, being able to exercise is a privilege, because what happens if it's taken away from me?
100%. So one of my favorite quotes in that book, Ikigai, that we spoke about off air,
Yes.
was or is, only exercise will make you want to live 100 years.
Yes.
And I think that's so true because it speaks to quality of life. If you're injured, if you're in pain, be it physically, emotionally, psychologically, that's not a good quality of life. And often those three are very much interlinked. You know, the physical, which we've chatted about as well, which I'd like you to elaborate on the link between those. The physical, the mental, and the emotional, you know, those are all interlinked and they drive each other. When one of those is out of kilter and out of whack, then it's more than likely going to affect the other two. And it's really crucial that we try and get at least two or at best three of them under control.
Well, I can honestly tell you, Clint, at my lowest times in my life, what I've done is exercise, because I knew my mind needed to be stronger, because if it wasn't, I was just going to go down a really deep, dark hole. And I've been depressed before, and I know that during that time, I never exercised, and I know that the only thing that really got me out, I mean, I'm not talking about a support system.
Yes.
Even my support system going, you can do this, you know, all the compliments you can get, all the affirmations that you need to be said does not take the place of you physically doing something, because when you physically do something, we know those happy hormones start running through our body. It's scientific.
Yes.
It happens.
Exactly.
And so I really can tell you and all the listeners that, and I don't know if it works for everybody, but for me, I exercised most of the time in my later part of my life. The earlier part of my life was because I enjoyed sport, but the later part of my life was for my mind.
Yeah, it's crucial. I mean, I was depressed at a time as well, and I was exercising throughout that time, but that for me was, I think it would have been way worse had I not been able to stay active. It's a lot easier for me to be active when you work at a gym.
Yes.
And spend the time at the gym my whole day. But one of the things that we spoke about and that I'd like to elaborate on is when the work that you do, you cover something that you call work-life balance. And it's a good segue talking about my work and what I do in fitness, and then into work-life balance. What does that mean to you, and what stands out to you in terms of what people should strive for as far as that's concerned?
Well, I can tell everybody that when I get it right, it's seasonal.
Yes.
It's not consistent, but the things that are consistent are habits. And so the habits, just like when you get up and you don't have to think about walking, if you're physically able, then you have to create those habits that you don't have to think about, where you don't have to make a decision, where the demons and the angels in your head are not fighting whether you should or you shouldn't. It's just 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Yeah.
And so those habits are crucial, because those habits actually lead to self-discipline. And self-discipline leads to motivation. I almost think it's a formula.
Exactly. So, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yes, I've read it.
Mark Manson. So one of my favorite takeaways from that book is action breeds motivation, not the other way around.
Yes.
And it's exactly that. It's, can you, at your lowest point, find out what's the heaviest load I can carry, literally or figuratively, at that point in time, and then go and do that. For me, so I'll give you an example. I've got a client of mine who has promised himself that he's going to get up early every morning, because that's when he feels like he can make a better, more productive use of his day. And it allows him to do the things that he likes to do in the evening, such as go to gym, play paddle, etc., without it taking too much time away from work and family.
Yes.
And he wanted to do that Monday to Friday. And he's a night owl, so he'll go to sleep at 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, no problem. And he's been battling with this for a while, the fact that he can't get up in the mornings. So I said, oh, how often do you want to do it? He says, no, every day, Monday to Friday, every work day. Okay, that's fine. And how's that going?
Yeah.
No, I haven't done it once. Okay, so clearly you are essentially trying to squat 80 kgs when you haven't learned to even squat 20. So you're setting yourself up for failure.
Great example.
What's the heaviest load that you can pick up at the moment? In this case, maybe start with a Monday. Start with a Monday and say, okay, every Monday morning, I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock. See if you can do that. If you can do that, then you've earned the right to then try and do Monday, Tuesday.
Yes.
But don't set yourself up for failure by setting the bar all the way up here and then trying to jump 5-6 steps from the bottom of the staircase.
Yes.
You know, so I think it's a good example, and it's an easy way for people to start to make the steps that they need, wouldn't you say?
I do, and one of the important things that I've realized over time is getting to know yourself. If you really know yourself, you're not going to force yourself to be someone else. So I've read the 5 a.m. Club, and I am not a morning person. So thank you for having a late podcast. But no, I'm not. And there are times that I do go to a gym session at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it's once every blue moon, and it's because my day has dictated it. But I know it's not who I am, it's not what I want to do. Does it really matter when you achieve what you want to achieve?
No, I don't think so.
No.
As long as you do it.
My point. So if I find myself doing my walk, doing my run, because I've got children and I'm running up and down between schedules, work, etc., in my weekly life, my goal is to exercise 4 to 5 times a week. Now, on those 4 to 5 times a week, one week, I could have a great week, and I could be running and walking, and the next week I'm just not having a great week. Well, you know what? I still go out, and I may not be able to run or walk for that hour, but I'm going to do 15 minutes because of the habit. The habit tells me to get out. The habit tells me to get moving.
Exactly.
And therefore, when I'm done with it, I'm so proud of myself, actually. Instead of criticizing myself for only doing 15 minutes, I'm proud of myself now because I actually got out and did it. And that's another mindset that, and I find a lot of women are struggling with. If I can't do an hour, I'm just going to do nothing.
Yes, it's just all or nothing. Like for him, it was all or nothing. It was either 5 days a week or nothing.
Yes.
And it's not a constructive mindset.
No.
And what that does, even if self-esteem, I believe, comes from the evidence of your previous actions that is going to give you a case to be made for where you're at in the present moment. So the evidence might be, I walk no matter what. Even if I haven't done 4Ks, 60-minute walk, I've at least done 15. There's this book of evidence that accumulates over weeks, months, years, that eventually changes a person's self-esteem and self-image. But one of the things that I've been sort of wrestling with philosophically is respect. And when I had David Allen on the podcast, who's a body language expert, he said one of the only thing that people want when you ask them how they want to be treated, they want to be treated with respect. They don't even necessarily want to be liked. Respect is what comes up time and time again. So then you look at the thoughts that you think to yourself and that internal dialogue that you spoke about earlier with respect to your walking. And I thought to myself, when I get a negative space, would I say to other people what I'm saying to myself?
Sure.
And it's just downright disrespectful. Like if I had to say, Clint, or to other people what I say to myself, Clint, you lazy, you didn't do gym when you know you should have done gym, and da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
That would be disrespectful to somebody else.
Yes.
So why on earth am I letting myself get away with being disrespectful to myself?
Yes.
And it's quite a revelation that people, I think, and to your point, women in particular, are guilty of berating themselves unnecessarily. Lisa, for example, seasons, she's now at home looking after Grayson, 7 months old.
Yes.
Sometimes you don't get to do the things that you set out to do, but she would never go and point fingers at somebody else and say, are you lazy, or are you a terrible mom, or are you this, or are you that?
Yes.
Or you're not being productive is a big one at this time especially. So why on earth, if you wouldn't say that to somebody else, would you then demand that or say that to yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, I just want to go back to respect. Respect is needed and wanted by even the youngest of children. I remember, just a quick story, my daughter goes to grade 8, she's in grade 12 now, and she goes from a primary school to a high school. And in the first week, I say to her, so how are you enjoying it? It's a big step, you've gone from co-ed to all girls, first year of high school. And she's like, Mom, you can't believe it, these teachers show us so much respect, and I'm only 14. And I was like, what? This is not what I expected. I wanted, the girls, and we're doing fun, and we're doing this activity. And that is what a 14-year-old noticed from senior primary to high school.
Yeah.
And I can honestly tell you, when I train, most of the people that I've been training over the last few years has been a blue-collar worker, people from communities, underprivileged backgrounds. And one of the biggest, well, actually there's two biggest areas that those people want. And I shouldn't say those people, I should say every person wants, is respect and being treated fairly. It's two simple things. So irrespective of you driving the Ferrari or coming to work in a taxi, if I treat you the same and people witness that, you're going to get that respect. And for me, sometimes that's what leaders miss.
Yeah.
And if I want it, then I have to give it. It's a simple thing. Do unto others what you want them to do unto you.
100%. So that comes back to something else, which is then accountability. I'm a big believer that you can't necessarily control what happens to you sometimes, but you can always control how you respond. Okay. If you don't believe that, then you're likely to fall into a victim mindset. Woe is me, everything happens to me, it's out of my control, I can't do anything about it. So to your point, I'll say that it starts with the individual. If I treat myself fairly, and if I treat myself with respect, under any circumstances, people are more likely to then treat me that same way. If I'm being disrespectful to myself and I'm not being fair to myself, and that people can tell by your behavior, people are less likely to treat you with that respect. If you can't treat yourself with respect, how do you expect other people to? So to bring the power back to the individual, start with that. If somebody, I would say, is battling with something like that, you can't control how somebody else is going to treat you with their biases, their backgrounds, etc., etc. Start with what you can control as the individual, and by doing that, you can influence your immediate sphere of people, your immediate circle, which then can grow into something bigger. Maybe now you influence 3 or 4 of your staff members, your colleagues, that decide to conduct themselves in a similar way, and you build strength through unity in that way. That's how something meaningful grows, and that's how you get into a good space in your life and develop healthy habits, etc.
Yeah. Also, it's quite, it's a culture you can develop, because if you respond well, you'll change other people's behavior around you.
Yes.
Because if you think about it, like if people keep responding, or I actually call it reacting, because reacting is when you don't process anything in your mind, and you're just, bleh,
I like that. It's unconscious.
Yes. And responding is when you are conscious of what you're feeling and how you're going to navigate those emotions during that time that you're feeling it. And we're talking seconds here.
Yeah.
And then how to respond to it. So some people will turn around and say, you know what, I'll get back to you on this. Because maybe inside of them, they can feel their body is giving them symptoms that, I always say, it's like when you're about to get a cold, your throat is sore, maybe you got the sniffles, and you'll just, you haven't got a cold yet, but you're going to turn around and say, I think I'm getting a cold. And often when our body starts to tell us what we're feeling, so if your ego is in overdrive, and we all have an ego, some people more than others, some people's ego is the master of them, and some of us realize that I do have an ego, okay, but I want to make sure that my ego is not the master of me in hopefully every situation, but that's not possible. But my body is going to tell me that my ego that my body's going into self-preservation mode.
Yes.
You know, my breathing changes. I almost feel like my blood is hot. And so therefore I know that I'm going to react if I don't sit and process this. And sometimes I need a longer period of time. Sometimes I need less time to do that. But that's what happens in our life. And when we react, I don't know about you, but I'm generally not proud of myself. Because I have, again, going back to what you've said, I've not shown myself respect. And by default, I haven't shown the other person respect.
Exactly.
And so that is why we just need to be so much more conscious of what our body is telling us during that time when we want to go into self-preservation mode. And we also need to be conscious of our emotions, because our emotions are only visitors. They're not there to stay.
I like that.
And when we realize that emotion is attached to a short period of time, because you can sit with something and in 24 hours you're going to go, you know what, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to leave it. But 24 hours ago, when somebody really upset you, you'll be like, this is a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when you realize that these feelings that you're having, or these emotions that are sitting with you, and they're affecting your biology inside of your body, you can say to yourself, I need to sit on this. I need them to leave my house, these emotions.
Yeah.
They're only visiting me. So when they leave, I'm then going to be conscious of what's really important to me and how I'm going to respond to it.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
No, it's not easy at all. But to your point, it's important for somebody to have a toolbox.
Yes.
What you've alluded to there is effectively self-awareness. Okay. So to have awareness of the emotions that I'm feeling in the moment, and then what to do about this situation. So to respond, not to react, like you say. So then a person should have a toolbox. Okay, so how do I change my state? Is there a way that I can change my state optimally and faster so that I can get to a different state? Because in a different state I get different answers.
Correct.
And therein lies the power of going for a walk, going to the gym, meditating, etc., etc., etc. Have your toolbox
100%.
so that you can change those states, so that you don't compound and make a mistake out of reaction, rather than take a step back, reevaluate the situation, remove yourself from the emotion, and then make a productive decision thereafter. And that's something that's stood out to me in my research when I was going onto YouTube and I was watching your videos and your posts on social media and on the website, is you've experienced a lot. And you've been brave enough to put that out into the metaverse and to speak to people publicly about the different challenges that life has thrown you. Why have you decided to be public about the obstacles that you've had to overcome?
So it's a really good question, because I have really, in the last, about a year and a half, I've made a promise to myself. And when you make promises, you generally need to keep them. And there's many promises I've broken to myself, but being self-aware of that, I have asked myself, how authentically do you want to live life? And what is it that drives your passion? And having trained for almost 10 years now, I realize what drives my passion. It doesn't mean that I have to stay in training. What I realize is that my love language is acts of service.
Okay.
And so if I can help make a difference to one person, for me, that is an act of service. And before, I will be honest with you, before I even started the social channel, I kept saying to myself, you're a nobody. Why would anybody want to listen to you? There are lots of stars out there that can do the same thing.
Self-respect.
Yes, exactly. And again, it goes back to those little demons, those stories that you keep telling yourself. And they could come from, your childhood, what was ingrained in your mind back then. And so there were things that I personally needed to overcome, and those were limiting beliefs that I've had all my life. And then realizing, what is it that lights my fire? And once I knew that, and I always did, but it was, what are you going to do about it?
Yes.
And so when I realized that I could do that and be okay with changing one person rather than saying, remember that all or nothing we spoke about earlier?
Yeah.
Okay, you can't do this because if you don't change thousands of lives, you're nothing. And what's the point? Who wants to hear your story, right?
Exactly.
And I just decided that I'm going to take the leap of faith, not worry about who's judging, not worry about, am I big enough? I'm just going to be brave enough in my own healing process and do this. So whilst I'm serving others, I'm actually serving myself in all of my flaws and all of my demons that I tell myself, and overcoming so many things while I'm doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I love that. And that was one of the things where the podcast we were chatting off air, it was the birthday of the podcast on the 1st of July. And I did a post about what I've learned over the course of that year. And to your point of what you've just said there, one of the things that I remember posting was that nobody actually really cares what you do. And for me that was quite liberating, because in your mind, I'm thinking, oh, people are going to look and they're going to be like, oh, nobody listens to his podcast, or why on earth what gives him the right to have a podcast and to interview people and to do this and that. But that's all stuff that I feed myself, being disrespectful to myself. And once I realized that actually nobody gives a shit, then it's kind of like, okay, well, I can go along my merry way. Yes. And I can go and do my thing and chat to people that I find interesting. And if one person likes the episode and can learn something from it, then cool.
Yeah.
It was like a weight was lifted, because then it's like, actually, I don't really care.
Yes.
And then once you don't care in the what people think space, you can then start to move and you can act more authentically, because you can be your true self, because you're not worried about what people are going to think about you.
And your ego is getting less and less, because I think the ego is probably the root to many evils in our world. But there's something you said off air as well. It was a quote about a fool, and I really want, I want to hear it again, only because I think a lot of people out there can be motivated by that, and I'm terrible at remembering,
Yes.
so please remind me.
From the first episode, it was, you first have to be the fool before you can be the savior.
Love it.
You must be prepared to be the fool first, because nobody is good enough to skip to the end part.
No.
You've got to go through the levels.
Absolutely.
And going through the levels, everything that you've overcome in the obstacles that you've spoken about on your different social channels, you undertook a journey to climb Kilimanjaro. Why that? What did you learn from that journey?
So many things that I learned, but there's two things that come to my mind immediately, because I've had almost a year to reflect on it. Even though the first 2 weeks when you come down from the mountain, I'm not sure you reflect on anything but being alive.
Just kiss the ground, happy to be in my bed, I'm alive, I made it.
Is that, and this may seem very odd, but it's honestly the truth, is that I came down thinking that I can't do anything alone anymore.
Okay.
And I don't mean to be codependent on somebody, but to collaborate with people. I learned that 10% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And that stood with me as I entered in 2024, because I realized that everything in my business, even if I'm collaborating with people doing the same thing I'm doing, is that the 10% is going to be so much, it's going to be worth so much more. It's like the 80-20% rule in life, is that we only walk on 20% of 80% of the carpet. So a lot of us, and I can speak for myself, was if I can't get all the success by myself, or, abundantly live life knowing that, oh, you did it, is that I realized that I actually have done very little. All my successes have been as a result of people around me. And Kilimanjaro was the same thing. I got altitude sickness at about 2:30 that morning. We had started walking, to summit on the 5th day at 11 p.m. And I started to get altitude sickness. And I constantly felt like I needed to vomit. And we're already walking slow. And so now I'm walking even slower. And the guide took my left hand and he held my hand from, it was around about 2:30 until I actually got to the top of the mountain. I summited and it was about 8:15 that morning. And it was a moment for me that when I took my picture, I wanted him in the picture.
Yeah.
Because I just knew that I didn't do it by myself. And another very spiritual thing that happened to me is that I realized that without God, going forward in my life, everything is about him. Like everything that happens to me is about him wanting me to be the best that I can be and making those things happen. And on my 4th morning, I had quite a routine up the mountain. So every morning I would do the same thing. I would put my clothes, my bags in the same places in the tent every single day. I would put on my socks first every single morning. So I had a massive routine because I really believe in habits and what they can do for your mindset, especially when you're going through stress or you're going through, turmoil in your mind, or even your circumstances in your life are just not great. Those habits just keep me focused and keep me sane and make me feel human when I don't feel great. And I was listening to Deepak Chopra that morning because I had downloaded, and my battery was actually on low. So I'm glad I only downloaded 2.5 minutes of his, I don't know what it was called, but there was 2.5 minutes every day, and every one of them had a different theme to it. But I just pressed play out of, as I felt it. And we were about to climb the Baraka wall, and we had slept next to that wall the whole night. So it wasn't like something you could avoid. You knew what that wall was about for many hours. Yeah. And that morning I listened, and he had said that, your ego stands for edging God out.
Oh, wow.
And that you can't do anything without him. Let me tell you, I climbed that mountain like a Trojan.
Really, eh?
It's like, I'm in it to win it.
Yeah, see, that's amazing. I like that.
Yes. So that was really important, and it's helped me get through some really difficult times over the last few months. My faith has really, really carried me through. And I think that if people with massive egos lose the ability to know that there's something higher than them. In my case, it's God. For other people, it may be something else.
Yeah.
But to know that you can rely on something like faith. I mean, fear is also invisible, so is faith. Again, we were talking about what's your heart. They're both hard. Which one are you going to choose? Fear and faith is invisible. What am I going to choose? I'm going to choose faith, even though I do experience fear.
Yeah.
And so those were my learnings, to collaborate with people and to lean into a higher power and rely on that when I'm confused, sad, lonely, isolated, at a crossroads with decision-making. And every human experiences that. Doesn't matter how much money you got, and it doesn't matter how happy you are in this season. There is going to be a season of drought and storm.
100%. And that speaks to what you're saying earlier about not wanting to do something alone. I think that's one of the major pillars of religion. People talk about God. It's that you are never alone. Because you always have God.
Yes.
Wherever you might be.
Yes.
And whatever circumstances you might find yourself in. You made another wonderful video. One of the quotes, you said, to win at life, you need to be a participant. You need to participate in your life. And I find that so many people are not participants in their life. They are participants in the life and the goals and the dreams of other people.
Yes.
How do you define winning at life? for you, because it's different for everyone.
I think it's what you mentioned earlier was that, when you are active in life, if you sit and do nothing, you will receive nothing. I often use analogy about the bird in the nest, that, if you see birds on the side of the road and they're dead, you're not going to think that they died of starvation. Your mind's going to go to they've been knocked over, or somebody shot them with a ketty, or, something of that sort. But a bird has not died of starvation, because they leave their nest, and when they leave their nest, they're provided for.
Yes.
And so if we look at our nest as our life, or our home or our couch, you can't expect to be provided for if you remain in the nest. And so for me, being a participant in life means that I need to leave the nest. And when I leave the nest, I'm creating opportunity and I'm creating some wins. And when I have wins, I'm going to have I can moments. And the more I can moments I have in my life, small, medium, large, the more I'm going to build my self-esteem. And when I can build my self-esteem, I'm going to make better decisions because I'm going to be less afraid.
Yes, more confident and more reassured of what you can do.
And a lot of women, and obviously I can't speak for men, but a lot of women, I know that because I have a community of women that, I write to every week. And I know I get messages every single week. I got a message just before I came here today about my latest posting. And it's the confidence. It really keeps women back. And I don't know how men feel. I mean, maybe you can tell us.
I think that men feel the same way in many respects. I think that we are put under pressure by society to act and behave in a certain way with respect to, for example, mental health and your emotions. And you have to be stoic, and you have to be the rock, and you have to be dependable. And I think we have a men's mental health crisis as a result because of that bottling up.
Yes.
And that fact that men don't see it as being appropriate to acknowledge the fact that they might be feeling vulnerable or emotional or insecure. And because of that vulnerability, that insecurity starts to manifest itself in other ways that are more manly, such as aggression, such as being rebellious.
Yes.
Which might manifest itself in drinking, going out, partying, whatever the case might be. But I think that's a major hurdle that men face in society at the moment, is that they need to be made to feel that it's okay, that you can talk about your vulnerabilities and your insecurities. That is the better way of dealing with it than going to a more traditional manly route, which might be aggression, for example.
Yeah, or men taking, they need to take control of a situation so they can show their strength and the power that they have. Because, I mean, if you listen to Brené Brown, she often speaks about vulnerability and how people can see that as a weakness, but it actually takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And I can tell you now, as I've created my social pages, and you'll see with time it's just changed over the last few weeks especially, I'm a little bit more vulnerable about the challenges that I have faced. And I've needed to build the confidence to become braver to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that again. I had to build the confidence to become braver so I could be vulnerable. And I think we need more people, like you and other men out there that start to normalize it. And that's one of my objectives on my socials, is to normalize vulnerability without being a victim.
Yes.
Very important. Because if you're in the victim mindset because of your circumstances, you're going to make excuses, you're going to blame other people, you're going to shame other people, and that's not the point. The point is to be vulnerable so that you can be authentic in your healing process to yourself and serve others who need to hear it because they're not there yet. Because you and I know that it takes a while, and it's not a set amount of years, is what you put in yourself. Your learning that you put in yourself will determine how long or how short it's going to take.
Exactly. And Yeah, I think that's very important, eh? But the trick is, again, it comes back to self-respect, and it comes back to picking up the smallest possible load that you can at the time, because that is what develops that positive momentum to eventually take bigger steps. One of my favorite sayings, I think it was Tony Robbins. Yes, Tony Robbins. We overestimate what we can achieve in 1 year, but we underestimate what we can achieve in 10.
True.
And I think it's because there's that slow build, there's that building of evidence, an encyclopedia of evidence, that even though I wasn't getting rewards, I was still performing the acts that I knew that were the right things to do. I converted those acts into habits where they became automatic, regardless of my emotional state that day. And in doing so, you then persevered, and after a year, 2 years, it then became something that in 10 years' time, you would never have imagined that you would have been able to get to that level, Similarly, if Kilimanjaro, climbing a mountain is a wonderful example for so many things.
Yes.
But it's like, you look at the top, you look at the summit. Can you even see the summit from when you're at the bottom? I don't know.
So you can, but it depends on the cloud covers.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah,
So somebody might stand there on a clear day and see the top of Kilimanjaro and think, good heavens, there's no ways I'd ever be able to get up there. That might be the 10-year, that might be the decade.
Yes.
But if you start by just taking one step at a time, and then, like you say, you break it down and you develop your habits, you develop your healthy routines and your rituals, and you hold yourself with a certain degree of decorum and self-respect, that before you know it, you're halfway up and you're like, okay, I'm halfway. And then you realize, then you get to the top and you think, good heavens, I never thought I'd be able to do that.
You've actually reminded me of something that I also learned on that mountain, and I spoke about it at a talk last year, which I've actually forgotten about, is that one thing I also learned about that mountain was I had the goal to summit. Mm-hmm. Obviously, everybody does, right? But there are things out of your control. So you can train as hard as you want to. If you get altitude sickness or you lack oxygen, your oxygen levels are too low, then unfortunately you're not going to get there. And that taught me, again, when I mentioned let go, because I'm not in control, I can only do the best that I can each and every single day I got up. All I could do was get up and walk, which then showed me that the process sometimes is more important than the goal.
Yes.
Because while you're doing the process, while you're getting out there and walking towards that goal, it's just, it's metaphorically, we're walking towards that goal. It's the process that sometimes helps us to change direction to where we need to be. Because the goal is where we think we should be. It's what we really want. For whatever reason we want that goal, the process sometimes redirects us. I mean, how many times in our lives have we been redirected through the process of trying to reach a goal and then achieving another goal?
Exactly. I love that, the dedication to the process. And that also, something that I learned on one of the episodes earlier was, the guest said to me, you should never judge an experience.
Yes.
So never judge an experience. Just because that is the destination and something happened that was out of your control, this person, you lost a client, or you got sick the week before your event, or whatever the case might be. As hard as it might be to take in the moment, don't label that and judge that as a negative experience. That might be the pivot that was necessary to take those processes that you've learned and that you've applied to something that might be even greater than what you had originally identified as being your goal.
Absolutely, and the goal sometimes is based on our own limiting mindset. Mm-hmm. Whereas the goal, the abundance that you really deserve, is so much more than you think you deserve.
Yes.
And that's why the dedication to the process is so important.
I like that, Tanya. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. But before we go, where can people find you if they want to get in touch with you for any speaking engagements, if they want to get in touch with you to find out more about your services?
So I have all the usual social mediums, and it's tanyaprice.co, nothing else after that. And my email is tp@tanyaprice.co.
Okay, so I'll include that in the show notes as well.
Perfect. It was just such an interesting conversation, and I think it's just so important that as much as us women go out there and rah, rah, rah for the women, as you were saying earlier on, there is a mental well-being crisis amongst men. And can you imagine if we had champions on either side, multiple champions on either side, how that would positively affect relationships and friendships and working environments if men too could be brave enough to be vulnerable. So thank you.
What a wonderful way to finish. Thank you, Tanya.
Pleasure.
Not so fast. It is such a cool feeling when I see that Spotify subscribers number increase on the weekly, when I see the number of people listening to the episodes going up, and it really makes a huge difference. Have you ever done something and you feel so good when you get rewarded by some positive feedback and you really feel like you're making a difference? That's what it means to me, and that's how I feel. And it goes a long way. If you like the show, share it and subscribe it. Thank you humbly, and I'll see you next week.